All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. First on the agenda, we're going to switch up the agenda. We have a time certain that we certainly still didn't make the time. And so Megan Everett is here with ULEAD, and very much looking forward to your quarterly report. So take it away.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen. No, it was. I'm sorry. It's there, but it's not.
Here, click out of it, because I just, on the,
This?
go, click on the browser again, and just, because the code changed.
Oh, sorry, the code changed. Yes.
It's obviously recognizable that someone is sharing. I don't know what the issue is.
Sorry.
Oh, here comes the cavalry.
Jerry, help.
Show anything.
Well, I just want to share this, and I didn't have it. Yes.
Otherwise, I really feel like a creeper. Unless you guys I should do that. I'll ask him and then he'll be like, yeah. Yeah, he should have it.
Would you like us to? Yeah. Randy, what have you got for finance? I mean, standards and assessment? Oh, never mind. We were looking at Plan B and,
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
okay, board, we've got a presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for asking me to report back on some of the things that we've been doing in ULEAD. Megan Everett, Director of ULEAD. And I hope to share with you just the tiniest of reminders about what ULEAD is and does, and then tell you a lot of the things that we've been up to. So ULEAD stands for Utah Leading Through Effective, Actionable, and Dynamic Education. And it was created with these 4 things in mind: to research the things that are going well in our Utah schools, curate those together along with other current research, connect people to those practices and to each other to support innovation and collaboration in a variety of ways, and then to report back on those practices, and very specifically around removing barriers to implementation so that other people could hopefully have the same experiences. So our process looks a little bit different from what maybe traditional research might look like, because we start with what do the data tell us is going well. And so we use skilled scores or growth over time or a variety of measures to look for those positive outliers. Then using higher education partners, go and look at what qualitatively is telling us about those outliers. So what are those practices that contribute to doing well? How could those be adapted or replicated? And then share and connect people with those. So this is a good example of what that looks like. We really focus on our participant identification to make sure that we're kind of taking all things into account, it's very easy to look at the top math score, but it can be a lot trickier if you start considering, well, what are other factors that might be influencing things at this school or in this LEA. Our partners go into school and they look for details around those practices because, as I'm sure you can imagine, PLCs are a great example of this. Almost everybody we know probably does one. And if we go into a school that's being really successful, they might say, oh, our PLC process is the magic. But then a school that's being not as successful is probably going to say, yes, and we also do PLCs. So we're really trying to suss out those details of why it's working in this place. Again, how that could be adopted. For example, if somebody has used a program that their success they attribute and relies on that program, well, somebody else would have to have the same funding for that then, right? And so what else could you do? And then we share and connect in a variety of ways. So we hope people read the research. We hope people engage with it or go a step further and make appointments or see other schools. But we try to foster that as well. So this is an example of a webinar we did that brought together teachers, district leaders, researchers, and USBE staff to talk about those practices. That was both live and recorded. So in the ULEAD legislation, it says that the way that we're going to report on these practices is an innovative practice report. And there are particular components that have to be included. The executive summary, the outlier methods, like how did we get to these participants, the review of research so that we can say, yes, this is a practice going on here and in a school and how it works, but oh, by the way, there is evidence or not, as the case may be, of what this looks like in the broader field of research. And practices for success are the main part of what we want to get to. What does this look like in your school, in your classroom? We talk about replication, limitations, provide resources, depending on the school that might look different, but maybe they give us their PLC template, for example. And then we include a video to help people kind of understand and make sense of the report. Also, maybe that's something that fits their learning style a little bit better. All of this is driven by our steering committee, and I want to recognize that the board has a place in that as a co-chair of the steering committee to direct. Their main purpose across the steering committee is to direct the focus priorities that we investigate, but then also help guide activities. What I think is most important about the steering committee is that we have representatives from both charter schools and traditional public schools. We have teachers, coaches, principals, superintendents represented, and then we also have business or citizens represented. And so we have this really kind of broad group making recommendations. So now I want to tell you about a few of our reports. I'm not going to go super in depth on all of these. I will show you where you could go read all of them if you're so inclined. But I want to tell you some of the things we've been working on. So one of our first reports was on attendance strategies, and we actually partnered with Utah Fellows. One of the fellows is a data scientist in Jordan District, and they found outliers in these 5 districts and went and talked to the people at the schools about their practices. They found that in attendance, those relationships with parents and students, having an accurate way to track and making sure that happened every day, timely communication and parent education were the biggest factors kind of influencing improved attendance outcomes. We're also excited that we've had other work going on around attendance and continues because this constantly comes up as one of the top interest areas in our steering committee. So Utah State University is currently working on another research project focused in high school attendance. We've created fact sheets, which is one way that we engage our research partners around these things. We've had the panel that I mentioned, and then ULEAD, myself, takes an active part in our USBE attendance team. Another report that we completed recently was with Utah State University. They wanted to look at particularly math teachers in middle school that were having success in Title I schools specifically. And so they ended up interviewing 7 teachers, 3 of the districts represented there. Not all 7 teachers in this instance wanted to be identified, and ULEAD does try to always identify them, so there were some other districts that aren't named there. They found 8 different strategies under these kind of 3 buckets. So what they were doing in instructional planning made a difference, what they were doing in delivering the instruction, and then what they had going on in assessment. We also had a video with this one. We were lucky enough to partner with UEN and their SciTech, and they had classroom footage and talked to the researcher, talked to our data scientist, and put together a really lovely video. And what's great about that partnership is then it gets shared to a broader audience through their networks as well. This is one that is very recent, supporting the science of reading. And this person wanted to look at those schools in K through 3. They had a relationship with the Washington County School District, so they focused on outlier schools within that district. And what they found was it was really instructional design clarity. So they really set out to look at how science of reading was being implemented, but came away saying, that instructional design clarity made a really big difference. And so some elements of that were that the student learning was student learning oriented, it was goal oriented, they had continuous collaboration, and they had robust school district supports. We have an upcoming webinar for this one, so that's exciting. It's on our website, and you can register live, and you'll get the recording, or you could see the recording later, where we're talking with some of the teachers and the researcher that took place in this practice. And then this report, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on. I do want to point out that Todd Johnson with Wasatch School District was highly supportive of creating this partnership with ULEAD, and had come to the board and requested a data sharing agreement to initiate this process. So, and thank him for being here. So, BYU has the public school partnership with these 5 districts, and their professional development coordinating council was really interested in finding teams that were doing really well in areas of concern. So one of those was in first grade literacy. So they looked for effective outlier teams. And one thing really interesting about the way they identified their teams was everybody on that team had to be successful. It couldn't be one teacher's scores pulling other teachers' scores up. And they found consistent use of data to inform the instruction, high team efficacy and collaboration, and then student goal setting and monitoring. So I want to show you a little bit about how this meets our innovative practice report model. And all of these reports do, but this is a fun one to look at. So this was the research team, and you can see that it was pretty large. We had representatives from BYU, but then also all the different districts. The executive summary, if you ever want to know what's going on in a report and you don't want to read the whole thing or don't have the moment for it, that's where you should go. We do 2 different kinds of participant identification in our reports. So one is that like really robust metric on how do we identify these outliers. The other is giving you a picture of what the school district or the school site looks like, because we think that's really important to people to say, oh, my school kind of looks like that too. Here's the review of research, and in this instance, it was included in 2 ways. So they provided some background research, what does the field say about high-functioning teams, and then within each theme, highlighted some big things that were going on in research that were relevant to that theme. So, you know, what is the research saying on high team efficacy and collaboration, and how we know that works. And then the practices for success. Like I said, this is the bulk of the report, and you know, depending on the topic, this comes out in different ways, but these are a couple examples. So here in the light green, each school told us very specifically what their intervention system looks like, how much time per day, how they rotate, how they use their teachers for that. In the Westridge Elementary gave us their success structure. So this is how they have collaboratively come together and said that we're going to attack this topic through our Acadians data, our Tier 2 interventions, and our PLCs. Another example is they talked about some of the professional learning that they had and what that meant to them and how they implemented it. So those are just 3 of the practices. There are a lot of specific practices throughout. And then replication. In this instance, these were their 3 big themes. They had some key takeaways for each of those. And what I kind of love about these in particular is some of these are things that a teacher could do tomorrow, right? So they talk about their students by name. They call them out by their first name. It's not my students or her students, it's our students. And then other things are systemic. They're going to take a little bit longer, you know, developing a clear understanding of learning trajectory. You can start that work, but certainly not going to happen just on Monday. And they provide the limitations. In this instance, the biggest one is that a lot of this was rooted in this collective teacher efficacy, so how they were able to work with each other, and that's a culture piece. It's hard to replicate a culture piece, and it's something that's going to take time. You can't purchase this as a product. Resources. In this example, here's one of the phonics continuums that they shared with us. In one of the other literacy pieces that I shared, they actually included their Excel spreadsheet of how they keep track of their students with no real student data in it, but another teacher could take that and input their own information and have that already figured for them. And then hopefully we can play this. So this is a piece of the video. Now, most of the videos are talking about the research, what they did, their practice. This one specifically talks about the board and ULEAD, and so I wanted to pull out this little piece.
That we already had a tight collaborative group with the 5 districts involved with BYU. We thought it was a perfect place for us to do a study. And then we were fortunate enough with the data sharing agreement that had been reached with the state, some work we'd already been doing with ULEAD, we were able to pull ULEAD on this project as well. ULEAD is a fantastic resource, probably an underutilized resource when it comes to the state. And I think this project shows the power that ULEAD can have in helping to influence education throughout the state.
So mildly self-serving of a video, but does speak to having that relationship with the board and being able to access the data that they needed to then begin their investigation.
That we already have.
So in terms of some of the upcoming reports that we have, and this is not exhaustive, but some of the larger ones, we have a certified teacher librarians report. They were looking at how some of the practices in successful literacy environments were being supported with their certified teacher librarians. Early literacy classroom practices, that's actually a partner to the other literacy report where they had looked at how teachers were planning and preparing and being supported, and now they're going into the classroom and actually seeing the teacher in action on that side of it. Principal job satisfaction, so we have kind of a sneak precursor to this that's not in IPR form yet, but it takes the data that we learned through the survey and kind of highlights how principals were feeling. And you'll be glad to know that Utah principals by and large are pretty satisfied. But then we're following up with those that were most satisfied, had the least amount of exhaustion to see how that was able to happen for them. The high school attendance report that I mentioned, and then the BYU PSP partnership, similar to the one that I just referenced that was first grade, is repeating that process this upcoming year, looking specifically at 6th grade mathematics success. And our first school visit for that is tomorrow, so very excited about that. We have other projects going on that I'll mention briefly and hopefully in the future dive into more deeply. We're working with the student services team and their innovative improvement initiative. These are just some pictures from the start of that. They're doing kind of a long-term project to kind of reimagine what MTSS could look like, but we helped coordinate with the Stanford D School around futures thinking, because if you really want to change a system, you have to be able to do that really innovative thinking and dreaming big. And so we've initiated that process with them. We had an in-person meeting, an online meeting. We have a couple more onlining. The groups that are involved, I believe there's 12, will get individualized coaching support for that. And then that sets them off on a trajectory to rethink their systems along with Dr. Voorhees' team. In middle grade mathematics, we also have an innovation cohort. We put it out there to spark innovation and collaboration. Then middle school mathematics became a topic, and we thought, well, let's focus it. So we've brought together 9 teams from across the state. They have an opportunity to meet together. We've done in-person visits to their schools. This is a little different. Instead of waiting for people to be amazing, we're working with them as they're being amazing. So they've selected some researched practices that they have made a plan for and are implementing this year, and more like a practitioner inquiry, we're alongside them as that process goes. So that's been really fun. One of the big things you may or may not have heard about is our innovative education program. And I say ours because ULEAD kind of manages it, but it is a legislative thing, and it's approved locally. So local schools, a teacher, a classroom, a counselor could propose an alternative curriculum or schedule. They seek local board approval, whether that's their school board or their charter board. And if approved, they can access up to $5,000 per innovation class and grant funding. We've had about 40 of these to date, but last year they modified the legislation so those funds don't expire. So there's $2.5 million put into that account, and it'll sit there for people to access. So you can see here somebody was exploring 3D calculus with augmented reality, and those funds were used to purchase some of that augmented reality materials. Or one of my favorites is this creative side of business, where they took traditional art class and business modeling and put them together to create art that would support industry. Big picture, fast look at some of the additional things we're doing. We're working on a COVID recovery report, which is in collaboration with a report that was already created for USBE through the National Center of Improvement of Educational Assessment. To see those schools that did recover and recovered really well, what they did. We're helping to coordinate the study from the board around the vulnerabilities facing our boys, and then also the vulnerabilities facing our girls, and kind of their role in our society. We've worked with the student services team in CEDAR, which is the Technical Assistance Center, which has representatives from across teacher education to think about how we're supporting our students with disabilities. We have a connection to the Science of Reading panel, and we've assembled the early literacy repository and worked on that for quite a while, and those materials are out there and available through UEN in their learning hubs. We've created research fact sheets that we share to try to prompt our researchers to want to be invested in the same topics that we're invested in. And then really exciting is we're working with the Utah Council of Education Deans to prepare a research ed conference. And that focuses on what we know from research and getting it into the hands of practitioners. And so that'll be next fall. Locally too, it's in SLC. And just to wrap up with our focus priorities, you heard a lot of different topics there. These are, again, driven by our steering committee and people working in education. So student attendance, job satisfaction. We do have a report on principals. We really want to get to that teacher perspective. Strategic engagement with technology. So how are we using that to its best advantage without over or under hitting the mark? Middle grade mathematics, which you heard. Multilingual learner achievement we know is very important to people. Now, across the board, we look for academic success. So these are our focus priorities, but sometimes you hear some other ones in there because they do contribute to student success. And then we have a few additional priorities that are under review. Every time we meet with our steering committee, we troubleshoot on issues that for whatever reason are not gaining traction with our researchers, or maybe we need to know what's out there before we can make a commitment to get started. You can find all of this and more at schools.utah.gov/ULEAD. And specifically, if you're looking for the reports, there's a reports tab. You could also get there through the repository tab. And that is a really fast look at ULEAD.
That is a very good overview. What questions do we have, board? I don't know how we would have questions after that thoroughness. Okay, Member Lear will.
I just was wondering, and you did say these things very rapidly, bless your heart, that was great. But I was wondering, it sounds like you're working more with USBE staff and also some different organizations in different pockets of the state. Is that what you do more than you work with legislators? Is that how it goes?
I would say yes. I think if in the ULEAD legislation, it's designed to draw upon the steering committee and particularly work with those higher education partners to unearth these practices and then report that back to the legislature.
Oh, yeah.
And report, I think, specifically around what are the barriers. So for example, if every school that we were investigating is saying you have to have a content coach, then reporting that back to the legislator that hey, supporting funding for content coaches is going to be a really big deal here because that's how we're finding the success.
Yep.
So I think that's the relationship to how we report with legislature.
So, just a quick follow-up. So it's a report back primarily relationship.
That's what I understand it to be, yes.
And I'm just thrilled that you're working with practitioners. I think you're super accomplished, read your resume, but I also think that we all can learn so much from those teachers who are there every single day in a classroom doing lesson plans, et cetera. Thanks.
Member Davis?
Quick question. I might have missed this. And how many people are in your department?
2. There is myself and we.
Whoever's back there laughing is the other one, I'm guessing.
I hope so. And then about a year ago, we brought on a full-time, like what would be equivalent to somebody in our data and statistics department, but is a data scientist that works with us.
So 3 now?
Nope, just the 2. So the data scientist and myself.
And you. Oh, got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Comment. I'll be short. Look at this. Molly's giving me just a quick one. You guys are tired of me saying how much I appreciate Megan. I helped write this bill 7, 8 years ago, whatever it was. We put it together with a lot of input from stakeholders and teachers. This ULEAD idea was you, the teacher, who are doing outstanding things in Utah. You're the leader. How do we find out what you're doing, share it? And so I got to tag along recently on a couple of these visits to the outliers that Jordan helped find. And it was just phenomenal. First of all, they didn't know they were outliers. We showed up, and Dr. Sudweeks at BYU is there to lend the outside analysis, and Megan's guiding the whole thing. Districts that are interested in learning are there, and these guys are the spotlight, and they're drilling down, okay, you jumped off the page, what did you do? And their first answer, one of them was, we did what? I didn't know we jumped off the page. And then they said, well, but here's some things we did. About 5 years ago, we started doing this, and we did this, and then that's what you see in these reports. So I just think it's a blast. I just want to, this will probably be a lot. My last part here was seeing a quarterly ULEAD update. So I just want to say thanks, and I think they're doing a lot to put the best of Utah education in the spotlight, and also with really rich understanding of how they're doing it in a way that can move the needle on student success and bring it up how we all want it to go. So it's one piece of the puzzle, but they're finding those gems that are really kind of shedding light on what it takes to be successful. I truly think any problem we have is usually solved by somebody already in Utah who's figured out how to do it well. And that's what ULEAD's spotlighting. So anyway, I just wanted to say thanks. It's fun to see all of this, making our great educators the stars of the show.
Thank you.
And-
Any other questions? No. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
And thank you to who is your data and research scientist?
Yeah, Jordan.
Jordan Green.
Okay, so Department of 2, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.